Hi everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for being here at our second coalition meeting of the year. We had our last coalition meeting in February, had an amazing turnout. We spoke about some important developments and issues/concerns, in the Moss Park community. We got to hear from a lot of our elected representatives and leaders, community members, and just had a really interesting conversation regarding issues that are important to us as a community. So just welcome again to the Community Benefits Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition meeting. Okay, so just another welcome again. So just a reminder that this event will be recorded, and we're going to be sharing the recording for outreach purposes that are related to the Moss Park Coalition. So online, on YouTube, so we'll have the link out just for folks who maybe weren't able to join. It'll give them another sense of sort of what the topic is and some of the developments that are occurring, and so that they could also reach out to us if they also have any concerns as well. So for any questions, just the regular Zoom protocol, you can use the hands feature to share any comments into the chat. If you have any questions, also feel free to input your email into the chat so that you can connect with us also and be part of our mailing list as well. And yeah, please do send us an email at mossparkcoalition@gmail.com for any inquiries or ways to get involved, or just emailing your thoughts in general. So this is a safe space. It's dedicated to creating an equitable, diverse, and inclusive environment for people of all races, genders, classes, abilities, ages, cultures, religions, and sexualities. So it's a safe place to speak. So feel free to share your concerns, share any thoughts that you might have as well. And yeah, and please note that again that this meeting will be recorded onto YouTube, and also we do have live transcription available for accessibility purposes. So just wanted to introduce our facilitators for today's event. We have myself. My name is Kaisazad, and I'm a member of the Moss Park Coalition, also working with Building Roots. And we also have Wali Ali, who is also here, and you may know him. He's a really amazing personality in our community, and a really important community leader as well. And just part of the Moss Park Coalition, some of our important members: the Toronto Community Benefits Network, Community Benefits Coalition, Neighborhood Pods TO, and Building Roots. So just the agenda for today's meeting. So we've had our welcome and our introductions. We'll be having our land acknowledgement, agenda review, and Zoom technical, qualities and instructions. We'll also be having like a welcome from, organizations part of the Moss Park Coalition, and a little bit about the Moss Park Coalition. We also have our guest speaker, and we're very honored to have here with us today, is Mark Clancy from Metrolinks, who will be providing some updates for us regarding some of the important developments regarding the Ontario line and the Moss Park subway station that are being implemented for the Moss Park community. We'll also have a section where we talk about what's at stake. So some of the important information regarding the Moss Park station, and just important details about how it's impacting our community, and also what we can expect to have within that process. Local impacts of the Ontario line and the increased developments. We'll be having information regarding that Ontario line in general. Summary of engagement and validating the priorities. So this is a really important aspect that we wanted to touch on in terms of going through the level of engagement that we have with the community and our community leaders, stakeholders, and organizations, and also going through those priorities that we outlined in our last meeting. Those things that we wanted to have for our community in terms of some things include transparency, accountability, and just being able to have community-based decision making. And we also are really honored to also have our City Councillor, Kristyn Wan-Tam, who will be also joining us around 2 p.m. And so we're really honored to have our councillor here with us. And next, we'll have some questions and answers for everyone. It'll be open for anyone to have any concerns, any issues or questions for anybody. We do have representatives from the coalition, from Metrolinks and the councillor as well. So feel free to, share anything that you have. This meeting is for our community. That's important that we hear our community's voices. And so that's what's our number one priority. And then we'll also have next steps and things that we will be doing in the future as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce our my co-facilitator, Wali Ali. Wali has worked extensively in the community and continues to do so. Things regarding affordable transit, environmental stewardship, equity and human rights. He's known for work with residents to create safe, inclusive, sustainable communities free from discrimination. He's also co-founder of the Coalition Against White Supremacy as well. Walid is a really, really important leader in our community who does a lot of amazing work. So, join me in welcoming Walid as our facilitator. Walid, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, guys. What a lovely introduction. So I'm just going to quickly go through the purpose of the meeting, but I also want to encourage us to get to know each other. So please feel free to introduce yourself on the chat. This is your first meeting. So the purpose of our meeting today is to validate the Moss Park community priorities, also inform the community about important decisions that will be about the future of Moss Park over the next few months. We also want to hear from you. And finally, want to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to get involved in decisions that will affect the community and the lives of all Moss Park residents. Next slide. This meeting has been organized by the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition, a community-led neighborhood coalition that respects the Indigenous cultural worldview that is based in kinship, taking care of our community, the people and the land, and sharing what we have with those around us. The process of revitalization here in Moss Park offers an opportunity through a Moss Park social development plan, which is, by the way, something that we're lobbying for, to honor the histories of the Mississauga, the Huron, the Anishinaabe, the Nisone, the Chippewa, as well as people that have called Moss Park home over the last century, and to preserve the spirit of community, neighborliness, and advocacy that has been so vibrant within our Moss Park community. We can acknowledge the history of the land and are committed to stewarding it and preserving it. So some context, the coalition could not have been possible without Building Roots. And I just want to invite Lisa or Darcy from Building Roots to just speak to Building Roots.
Hi, Lisa, you want to go ahead?
Yep.
You can start, I'll jump in.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. Building Roots is happy to be a part of the Moss Park Coalition and happy to have Kais joining to coordinate and lead this process. And Lisa and I have been involved in the Moss Park community for several years and with a strong team around the Moss Park market and a variety of programs, including our urban farm at Ashbridge Estate, supporting the market, and Bookshare, Coffee and Conversation every Saturday, and a number of programs, and we help to foster community leaders from the neighborhood.
And I'll just jump in and say Coffee and Conversations. Kais is there every Saturday with Mac, who is also on our team. And anybody is free to come by, have a conversation, ask about anything that's going on in the community, ask about the coalition, and your voices are very welcome. And please spread the word that that does happen every Saturday. And it's very successful, and it's been a great way of bringing the community together.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa. Next slide. So that's a really beautiful photo of what you just talked about, Lisa. Building Roots does advocacy, but also outreach so frequently, and I want to acknowledge that and also acknowledge the great work when it pertains to addressing food insecurity in our community.
Thanks, Walid.
So we're going to now talk about the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition. I'd like to go next on this. So here's some photos of some work we've been doing as a coalition in the community. We've organized a Moss Park tour of developments that are happening in our community. And you can see from the photo, we've got a bunch of residents that joined us. Next photo. I want to quickly invite Councillor Baker to talk about the Toronto Community Benefits Network. Go ahead, Mr. Baker.
Awesome. Thank you, Waleed. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kumsa, and I'm with the Toronto Community Benefits Network. We're an organization that's a nonprofit organization that works across the city of Toronto. We've been in our nonprofit was formed around 2014. And our focus is really about, looking at, large investments that are coming into the city of Toronto, mostly on the public side. So where we see a lot of public investments in things like transit, healthcare projects. I know we've been doing a lot of work with the Regent Park Neighborhood Association in Regent Park around TCHC revitalization. But our goal is really to make sure that the community is actually benefiting from these investments. And so whether it's around, good career opportunities and good jobs, or around, making sure that there are investments into things like community spaces, parks, and also making sure that the community is involved in actually shaping, what their neighborhood looks like. And so we've had a lot of experience, like I mentioned, working on 2 different transit projects in the city of Toronto. So a lot of the experience that we've been able to gain from Eglinton Crosstown LRT, which started in 2015 and now is just sort of finishing up, as well as the Finch West LRT. And one of the things that we've been continuing to communicate is how are we really building off the learnings from these transit projects. We know the significant impact, that these projects have on local communities. Good examples in Little Jamaica, from a lot of the businesses in Little Jamaica, were severely impacted by the construction of the LRT, and a lot of those businesses had to close. Very similarly, there have been other, issues that have also come up, through the construction of these projects. And so we know that there's a lot of impact to local communities. And so on the flip side, how can we make sure that those communities who are going to be impacted, like Moss Park, can actually be involved in really shaping how they actually benefit from these investments. And I think that's sort of the work that we've been doing with Building Roots and through the coalition is engaging residents, making sure people know about these changes that are coming to Moss Park. Because some of these important decisions are going to be made in the next year, and so it's really important that people are involved. And so we really appreciate all of you that are here today to be part of this important conversation. Thank you. And so
yeah, go ahead.
And so, like the Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition was an initiative that brought together local community organizations as well as community leaders into the conversation. We are a broad and inclusive coalition of residents, grassroots groups, and local service organizations. And we want to ensure equitable community benefits, including economic development opportunities for residents, are not only guaranteed, but directed by the community as part of the Metrolinks development plan. And as we've engaged in a conversation, one thing that we've heard a lot from residents is, even what are some of the impacts that go beyond just the Metrolinks Ontario Line project. And I know some of those points I think will be discussed today as well in the next few slides. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So just some history, right? The Moss Park Coalition has been very active over the past year, especially last year. We talked about the Moss Park tour earlier. You saw those beautiful photos, but we also have been doing outreach, specifically focused on Toronto community housing residents, DCHC residents, but also residents from equity-seeking communities, to help us plan for equity and a community benefits agreement. And we're looking at the opportunity of the subway that Metrolinks will be building in our community. And what we are hoping to do is actively participate through the Moss Park Working Group. Make friends with the awesome folks at Metrolinks. Thank you, Mark, for joining us. So working with the Metrolinks staff, and also have a conversation about what those community priorities are, so we could develop a community benefits framework and also a community priorities report that is going to be endorsed by residents of Moss Park. Next slide. So I'd like to invite my good friend, Mark Clancy from Metrolinks, just to provide us with an update. And I am getting messages from some folks who are trying to get into the meeting. So I will be doing that as Mark speaks. And thank you, Shana, for joining our meeting. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Waleed, and thank you everyone for inviting me this afternoon and allocating a bit of time for me to speak to you today about some of the work that we are doing within the Moss Park community. I do have a couple of slides that I do want to share, so I'm going to try to share my screen here. Although I'm not sure.
Make you co-host. 1 second, my friend.
Okay. Let's see if this works.
Let's see if you've got host here. You should have no problems sharing the screen. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. So, can you see my, let me know if you can see my screen, because
Yep, all good.
So you can see the presentation?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So just a few slides just to level set a little bit of where we're at with the Ontario line, and in particular the Moss Park Station. I see very familiar faces and names, so I'm really delighted to be here to spend a bit of time with you this afternoon. So on this particular slide, which I hope you can all see, and I hope it's large enough, if not, just let me know. But really what I'm showing here is the entire Ontario line route, which goes from Exhibition Station through the downtown portion of the city. The blue line is where the Ontario line is underground. The green line is where the Ontario line is at grade, so on the ground. And then we go up into the Thorncliffe Park community, and the pink section is the elevated section that connects all the way up to the Ontario Science Centre. So there's 15.6 kilometers of new subway. We've got 15 stations. There are various connection points to the TTC, to GO services as well. So that's at Exhibition, East Harbour, Pape Station, and up at the Ontario Science Centre, we will be connecting to the Eglinton Crosstown. And when it comes to Moss Park, this next slide is just showing the area. We call this the walkshed area, but really what this means is this is the area that we will be servicing with the new Moss Park Station, which will be located at Sherbourne and Queen in the northwest corner of Moss Park. So serving the Moss Park community, the St. Lawrence Market, Garden District, Regent Park, thousands of residents and thousands of jobs within a short distance of the new station. And we are working very closely with the City of Toronto on their revitalization project for Moss Park. This next slide.
Sorry, Mark, I think the slides aren't clicking forward.
Oh, can you see an image of the station now?
No, not on mine.
What we see is the Ontario Line Moss Park Station, April 20 to 22. So I think it's the first one.
Oh,
yeah.
Let me try that again.
You can stop sharing. You can try it again, just in case.
Let me resume share. How was that?
Yes.
All right, so sorry about that. Thank you for pointing that out. So this is an actual, this is a conceptual rendering of the Moss Park Station at the corner of Sherbourne and Queen Street. This is not the final station design. As you may recall, the provincial government released the station renderings at the end of March, when the government announced the groundbreaking at the exhibition station for the Ontario Line project. So there was a series of station renderings that were released, and I just wanted to share this with all of you and really to confirm that this is not the final image of what the station will look like. This is just an artist rendering, it's a concept. We are still working through the designs of the stations, and we will be working closely with each of the communities to ensure that the stations, wherever possible, can reflect the characteristics of each of the communities where stations will be located. So you may have seen these images in various news articles, etc., but really wanted to demonstrate that these are artists' renderings, and these will evolve over time as plans for the project evolve and as we continue our discussions within the various communities, including Moss Park. The next slide here, I just quickly wanted to show some of the work areas that will take place within the Moss Park space. And we know that this is very, this is a very important park space, green space for the community. And with this large scale infrastructure project comes some very difficult decisions. And what we see happening at Moss Park is the light green area is the temporary construction area. Now we're calling it temporary, but it will be there for several years while we are building the Moss Park Station. And then obviously that light green space that will be given back to the community. And as I mentioned earlier, we are working with the City of Toronto to coordinate their revitalization plans for that particular area of the park. In the reddish pink area, that is where the new station will be located, and the public access to the new station will be in that particular corner. The gray area shows the temporary driveway that will be in place to serve the arena. And construction for this portion of the Ontario Line is scheduled to begin later this year, early 2023. So it's not really that far away. We anticipate that the construction will be completed towards the latter part of 2027 into 2028. And that is the potential date when the green space there will be turned over to the city for their work. In addition to some of the construction activities in the park space, there will be a lane closure on Queen Street. This is the westbound curb lane on Queen Street between George and Sherbourne. It's a long-term lane closure, 7 years and 3 months. And that is where we need space to accommodate the construction vehicles, deliveries, etc. And just wanted to focus here that we will have a protected pathway for pedestrians and cyclists to continue moving along that section of Queen Street. And one of the reasons for moving the construction, I'm going to just go back one slide, to this section of Moss Park, just north of Queen Street, one of the benefits of having that location is we're not disrupting any of the TTC surface routes along Sherbourne or Queen Street. It's important that the TTC has complete access to those streets in order to serve its riders. And that's sort of where we're at with the project. And I know that there are, and we'll probably get into this discussion a little bit later on, where I can speak a little bit more about community benefits. But there are some areas that we are focusing on when it comes to our community benefits program within with the Ontario line. So I think at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And maybe perhaps I can just, if everyone's comfortable, I can pause here. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'm certainly happy to take those at this point, or we can do that later on in the meeting. I'm totally flexible. It's whatever works best for you. Darcy, I see your hand up.
Hi there. Thanks
Hi,
for
Darcy.
that summary. Just had a question. We had some questions before around, especially the east side of Queen Street. So you're just showing Queen and Sherbourne for everybody, and the park is to the west. So across the east, where there's a strip of stores and heritage buildings.
Is this on the east side, on the northeast side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, from there along the way to where the Moss Park Market is. I'm wondering if there's any disruption or anything proposed, because I guess the line would go roughly underneath that. So
Correct.
What kind of, along the north side of Queen Street towards Parliament, would there be any impacts and such?
So that's a great question. The work that will be undertaken along that stretch of Queen is completely underground. So there'll be no impacts at street level. And we will have sort of noise and vibration strategies in place to minimize some of that during the construction period, and obviously when the Ontario line is in operation as well. Keep in mind that the Ontario line trains are completely electric, so they're much more quieter than the TTC subway cars that we often hear and feel rumbling under our feet when we're walking through certain areas of the city. And those cars are, older technology, so they're louder. But as I said, the Ontario line subway cars are electric and they're much more quieter. So there isn't that same level of vibration and noise when the trains are running below grade. But there's no impacts to that section of Queen Street that you're referencing, Darcy.
Great, thank you very much.
Jelani, you want to go next?
Jelani.
Hey everybody. I'm not sure if I introduced myself. Jelani Matthew. I'm the community service coordinator for Toronto Community Housing in Moss Park. So I'm on the engagement side. Mark, I had asked if I can get a copy of that slide. Waleed had repeated that in the group. Hopefully I can, if that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure if you're the person to ask, but my questions are more related around not so much the physical impacts, because I don't think there's much physical impacts that will be happening to the TCAC communities from according to your slide. And I was on a call briefly with Darcy's team prior to that a few weeks ago, who also said that in place. My only concern is like impacts to, since you said it's electricity, would electricity rates raise for the surrounding communities who do pay hydro? Would that affect TCAC's rate in terms of how they pay for hydro in our buildings?
No, because
sure.
No, because that will be an operational cost. So the TTC will be operating the subway line, and that would be an operational cost that they would bear under their contractual obligations. So those electricity usage would not be passed on to tenants, residents, homeowners, etc. It would be strictly the
I'm,
responsibility of the
I'm,
operator.
I'm just speaking in general, like as the world becomes more and more
Oh,
green,
yeah.
obviously people are going to be using more and more electricity, which would have a hike in cost or
Yeah.
inflation in that case. Um, but more of those lines.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I was thinking of that as well the other day when I when the federal government talked about its electric vehicle strategy and some of its commitments to encourage manufacturers to produce more electric vehicles and consumers to purchase and utilize electric vehicles. It
For
does
sure.
make you wonder,
For sure.
how does
I'm
all
a
of
green
this?
guy. My car's
Yeah.
electric. So I think about it all the time, especially as the world becomes more and more green. I was like, man, yeah, I'm saving right now on gas, but I could be right back at this again in terms of
Yeah.
electricity once we all start charging at home and et cetera.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern, and it's interesting that I had the same concerns the other day, because I don't know what the expectation is as as more infrastructure and more people become reliant on electricity. You do have to wonder what those impacts are, from a financial perspective, right? But I know for the Ontario line, we're not expecting that to spill out into communities, but you do have to wonder when the world evolves into much more of an electronic space, what does that mean from a global perspective, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Sorry
good
guys, I've got a
question.
few more questions. So obviously there's economic impacts and what that may look like. For me, I was wondering if there's any opportunities for jobs for community members in the community, or whether that's scholarship opportunities, funding, program funding, job placements, apprenticeships, kind of similar to like what Revi has done. I know someone from Stronger Communities on here, which they pretty much get in terms of Revi and the funding and the scholarship funding that went into that towards tenants and kicking back to the community. If there's any opportunities for things like that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And Metrolinks has a community benefits program, as you may know. And we've had that community benefits program in place on the Eglinton Crosstown and the Finch West LRT. And I think you are probably aware of the government's recent commitment to ensure that there is I believe it's a minimum of 10% job opportunities required when it comes to infrastructure projects, including the Ontario line. So that is obviously a commitment that we're going to stand behind at Metrolinks. And I know that on the Eglinton Crosstown, there's over 200 and about 220 apprentices and journey persons recruited through that community benefits employment program. And a couple of 100 other type of professional and administrative job opportunities created through the Crosstown. So we're definitely looking at a very similar model for the Ontario line. Obviously, we're looking at those programs previously and applying any lessons learned from those existing programs. And but employment opportunities are definitely within our community benefits program and very much a priority for Metrolinks and for the provincial government.
Would we could take this offline at any time, Mark, but would we be able to connect our youth works program or anything like that regarding our kids and getting some tangible work experience in our youth? Right now we have a youth works program where they kind of shadow our supers or do community cleanups and things like that. Branching off into that kind of line might be something that may strengthen our communities and give them some tangible other work experience other than, shadowing supers and cleaning up the community, whether they're cleaning up the stations or learning to clean the trains or whatever that may be.
Yeah, you know what? We should talk about that further. I'd like to have a deeper conversation on that, because I think there are some opportunities that we can do within our community benefits program. But even as a good neighbor within the Moss Park community, I think there's some opportunities for us work together in those spaces. So yeah, maybe you and I can connect next week and talk a little bit further about that. I'd really
sure.
welcome that opportunity.
For sure. Great. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Giovanni, for
questions?
those excellent questions. I'm so glad that you focused on our youth, but also not forget about our seniors and opportunities for folks. So thank you for highlighting potential synergy when it pertains to the opportunities that may be created. Hoping that Kais, could you just share back the screen? So we'll go back to our presentation. I just want to thank Mark again for making that presentation and updating all of us about the progress when it pertains to the Metrolinks project in Moss Park with the Moss Park subway station. So I think we went through most of this. I'm just going to ask Kumsa, do you want to quickly speak to the changes in Moss Park?
Yeah, definitely. Are you able to just go to the previous slide? Awesome. So I'm going to share a little bit more about what's happening at Moss Park. I know Mark gave a pretty good overview of the new station that's going to be built in Moss Park. And the other sort of big development or changes that are coming to Moss Park is also with the John Innes Community Center, which is something that our coalition has also identified as an important opportunity, and that we really want to make sure that the community is involved in really shaping, what that, new John Innes Community Center and Moss Park will look like. The City of Toronto is the one that's leading that process, and I know that there have been some engagement already, and there will be continued engagement over the next few years in terms of getting more community feedback. I think tentatively the city is looking at completing the project by 2026, 2027. But there's also a lot of sort of collaboration, or I guess work that needs to be done with Metrolinks around the construction of the station, because there's going to be a lot of impact to the park, and also a lot of construction activity happening in the park area. So like I mentioned, this is another sort of a big area of opportunity that we really see ensuring that the Moss Park itself is actually in a better position coming out of all of this construction. And so that was something that we wanted to make sure we highlighted as part of this call. Next slide. And so in terms of the impacts to Moss Park, what we know so far is that the green space will definitely be impacted. I think Mark shared that, there will be construction will probably be going till 2026, 2027. So there will be a lot of years where the green spaces in the park will not be accessible. There is still some unclarity in terms of what decisions have been made in discussion with the City of Toronto, and if the community will be consulted around, some of the sort of, what comes after the construction piece in terms of, further enhancing the park, and then making sure that the John Innes Center, Community Center, is revitalized with the community's sort of feedback included. What we know so far is that the subway will lead to substantially more density. I think Waleed and Andre will speak a little bit more to that later. But we also know that there are going to be new amenities, through the revitalization of the John Innes Community Center. So additional recreation spaces and those type of things. And I think as a group, as a coalition, one of the things that we've identified is, can we advocate for excellent revitalized community center? And we see both Metrolinks and the City of Toronto as being important stakeholders in really helping us to achieve, an excellent revitalized community center. And so that's something that we're going to continue to advocate for, and continue to engage Metrolinks in the city around how do we achieve that community's vision for what we want to see in Moss Park. Next slide. The one way that we're doing this is through the Community Liaison Committee that was established by Metrolinks for the Ontario Line project. And so there's a specific committee that's engaging local stakeholders in and around the Moss Park area. The committee attempts to provide open two-way communication and sharing of information before and during construction of the Ontario Line project. And it's focused on a few different areas in terms of, important areas of discussion as part of these committees. And so I think we've had 2 meetings so far. I think the first one was before the New Year's, and we just had one recently last month. And the committee will continue to meet. And so I think this is, one opportunity that we see for the coalition to really advocate and bring forward some of the issues that we'll be discussing today directly to Metrolinks, and to make sure that some of these questions that we still have are resolved in a collaborative manner.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to speak now to the local impacts of increased development. Look at this beautiful illustration of all the applications related to developments that are happening in Moss Park. And this is super important for folks to understand, because there's going to be a lot of developments in our community. And we as a coalition want to make sure that our residents, folks living in the community, business owners, specifically small business owners, and other stakeholders are aware of these opportunities, so that they're able to participate in the process, to provide, to give feedback to the city and other authorities when it pertains to approval. So when you look at the diagram, you'll notice that most of this population growth from the Ontario Line is anticipated to occur around Moss Park, but also around the Corktown station, subway station. So where development applications are representing approximately 35,000 residential units. So this is very important for folks to note. It's a 500-meter radius around the Moss Park community. So let's move on to the next one. Next slide. So one important development, and I'm going to ask my friend Andre to help me speak to this slide. There's a specific application that is before the city when pertains to a zoning bylaw amendment for a 31-story mixed-use building with ground floor retail uses and about 340 residential dwelling units. The heritage listed properties at 229 Queen Street East and also at 120 and 122 Sherbourne Street are proposed to be retained. So I want to make sure that it's clear to everyone that those streets, those specific properties will be retained as heritage designated properties. This is an important conversation starter because we are in the midst of a housing crisis. And I would like to ask Andre to speak to this if you would like to, because there's no mention of affordable housing in the application. And I believe that there's going to be a community consultation happening next week. Andre, is that correct?
Yes, hello everybody. Yes, there is a community consultation that is scheduled to take place April 26 at 6 p.m. I did manage to finally track down the WebEx link, which I've posted it in the chat under more ways to join. I don't want to speak too much on this because, the developers, Dash, the city, Councillor Wan-Tam will be there. And any comments, questions, can be directed to them. And particularly the developers. And it's one of the few, unfortunately, it's one of the few ways to speak about this development in an open forum. So which is why I do encourage everybody to attend the meeting in order to hear directly from the developers and the opportunity to pose your concerns, which may include your affordable housing concerns.
Excellent. So we are going to actually have a prep meeting for those that have never deputed at such meetings, just to provide context. We're going to reach out to other residents who have not made it to this meeting, but we're super interested in this application that's been put forward to the city. Please note that prep meeting will be happening on Monday, April 25th, so 24 hours before that consultation, and it's going to be happening at between 2 to 3 p.m. So just note that, and also I'll include that in the chat. Next slide. Very important highlights. If there's one thing that I would like for you to take away, is this following slides. Very important. We received research thanks to Toronto Community Benefits Network of applications that have been submitted to the city over the past 180 days. So there's 89 properties and 20 active development projects. 16 out of 20 applications were either an OPA or rezoning application, leaving 4 of the 20 applications as site plan approvals. BJL Properties Inc. came up 3 times. And please note that this company is a developer landowner, and they're also a real estate brokerage with a development arm. Also note that 12 out of the 20 applications can be considered large-scale development. So over 100 units with various heights from 10 to up to 60 stories. Only 1 out of 20 active development projects mentions affordable housing units. And this information is readily available on the city's AIC website. It's a website where people could track development applications that are before the city. So in summary, in total, with the 20 developments, there are 4,316 total units, with only 32 being outlined as affordable housing units. This is deeply concerning, and I hope that you will join other residents from across neighborhoods in Toronto Centre. So our friends in St. Jamestown, Corktown, in Regent Park, Cabbagetown, all these communities, in making sure that we address the housing crisis in a very intentional manner. And that is making sure that we have designations of rent geared to income, not just affordable housing, deeply affordable housing. So folks are aware of those designations. I was actually invited by CP24 and other media outlets to speak to this point, because it's in the public's interest that people are aware of what's happening when it pertains to the applications before the city. Okay, next slide. So we're going to get into questions, and I'm going to ask my good friend Kais to help facilitate this portion of our meeting with our first question. Kais, go ahead.
Thanks, Walid. Again, thanks everyone, all our facilitators, for those amazing discussions and information. Just wanted to get things started off with a discussion question first. Just to start it off, what is one important need that you wish to be addressed throughout all these different developments that are occurring in the community? Need, it could be including social housing needs, as we've included services for programming for our community. Also looking for housing people experiencing homelessness. Community programs. All these things are different types of needs. So does anyone have any sort of things that could be said for important needs that they'd like to have?
So I see in the chat, let's see who has joined us here. We've got Naomi. There's a question. Is there not a new stipulation that any new developments must include affordable housing? No new housing without affordable housing and rent to own? Thanks, Walid. So, yep, that's an excellent question. Why are those stipulations in there? Kumsa, do you want to quickly speak to that?
Yeah, I can quickly speak to that. I think it's an excellent question. Um, just last year, I think it was late last year, the City of Toronto passed the inclusionary zoning policy. And what they did was they applied it to, there's different zones in the city where the inclusionary zoning will apply. I know in the downtown area, there inclusionary zoning will apply. However, it may not capture all of the developments, especially if certain developments where applications were put in before the policy came into effect. And so I think that's something that we have to kind of continue to sort of look into by development to see if the inclusionary zoning policy applies or if it doesn't. Because I know there were a lot of developers who were kind of racing to put in their applications before the zoning policy came into effect, which would allow for, I think, for the downtown area, I think it's 10% of new residential development would have to include affordable housing. And so I think that's something that we want to sort of monitor to make sure that, you know, at the very least, you know, all developments are at least meeting the standards the city has through the inclusionary zoning policy, which I think would be a really excellent start. But it's going to take a lot of involvement from the community, right? And so, like Waleed mentioned, like the upcoming meeting on the 26th, you know, it's a 31-story development. We don't know yet if inclusionary zoning will apply or not. But if we attend and you know, make those questions and bring it forward to the city to say, you know, is inclusionary zoning going to be there? You know, we want to make sure it's included. And so I think, like, you know, just having that active involvement, I think will be really important to make sure that, you know, we can achieve as much affordable housing as possible from these new developments that are coming into our community.
Well said, Kumsa. And Naomi, thank you so much. And yes, please share your thoughts in the chat. And just before we proceed, I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Kristyn Wan-Tam has joined our meeting. Welcome, Councillor Wan-Tam. And Jermal, welcome back, friend from TCHC. Please share your thoughts in the chat. Yeah, this is a big problem. I agree with you, Naomi. Thank you so much for mentioning it. And we need to make sure that we are actively involved in the consultation process to ensure that at a bare minimum, that those plans are changed to include you know, affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, because it's so crucial. It's so crucial. There's so many people that are not able to access housing, which in my opinion is a human right. So thank you, Naomi, for sharing all the information in the chat.
Waleed, hi, it's Kristen. Thanks so much. And I think, Kamsa, you raised a really good point around inclusionary zoning. Just so everyone is aware, inclusionary zoning will come into effect for the City of Toronto as of September 18th. So that is the date where every single developer in town is trying to get in front of the applications. So therefore, their application is not required to build affordable housing. So the community will see an avalanche of new applications because that's the date that they're all trying to avoid. Yes, Naomi, good point. You bet that is exactly what's happening.
Good to know. Thank you, Councillor, for mentioning that.
No problem.
So we're going to ask you folks to think about other needs, other important pieces. At the beginning of the meeting, we don't just talk about affordable housing or deeply affordable housing or rent geared to income, but we talked about the importance of community spaces. We spoke about other priorities when it pertains to securing good jobs in the community. So what are other folks' thoughts? We'll leave it a bit open, and Kais, go ahead with the next question after this.
Yeah, so everyone, you know, feel free to put in like your thoughts and, you know, your questions or even sort of just your ideas into the chat as we go along too. We'll be happy to address them as we go along. We'll also have a question and answer session at the end where you can direct your, you know, thoughts and concerns to the team and also our elected leaders and representatives. So just to go over some community priorities that we had outlined in our last in our last meeting as well. So just to go over them again, because these are really important. Without community priorities, you know, we need to be able to have some sort of, you know, plan for ensuring that our community, you know, receives those types of, you know, the things that are able to help them out in light of all these developments. So we've actually been speaking with residents in Moss Park and getting their thoughts and concerns regarding some of the different developments, sort of like the Moss Park subway station, and also different types of things that are going on at the Saturday markets, at the Moss Park market, and also different ways of engagement as well. So a lot of the residents in the neighborhood were, I would say, a couple months back, were unaware of sort of like the planned subway station in general. They didn't really have much of an idea that the subway was actually coming. Um, and a lot of the concern was regarding, changes to green space and the park actually being out of commission, and loss of all these trees. In the city as well, it's a bit difficult to find a lot of free green space. There are, places that there are free green space, but as it is taking away sort of this, space is something that impacts a lot of people in our community and is really used a lot. We've been hearing a lot about the John Ennis revitalization and when this sort of new community center is going to be coming. It's been a long time since we've been hearing about this new community center, and I think residents are concerned about having these services revitalized. There are also concerns about plan for unhoused neighbors. So with all the construction and sort of like the subway station, there has been a concern for, people who are experiencing the homelessness in the community and how that is going to impact them. And we've also had, concerns regarding access to good jobs for equity deserving, groups of Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, and vulnerable, people who are in our community. So basically, just to continue on, we've been having concerns about the location of the subway station and wheelchair accessibility, and I'm sure those are things that if anyone has questions about, and certainly we do have questions about that. Mark, from Metrolinks can give us some feedback on. We've also had concerns about safety, community safety during construction, as that's a really important issue. Impacting safety, noise pollution, traffic congestion. That's also been a huge concern. It's a long process that can be out maybe 7 to 8 years or even more. And so, residents are concerned about, this overwhelming process. Small businesses around Queen Street and how they're going to be supported as well, and that loss of revenue and how that sort of becomes compensated with all these construction and all the impact that occurs. And again, will development affect affordable food and housing and all and our sort of community spaces that we hold so dear to our hearts in the community. And also, we just also want to know what your priorities are. These are just some things that we've heard from residents, but everyone has different priorities that are also very meaningful and important that we need to be able to hear. So feel free to put into the chat. I know Jelani has put something into the chat regarding access to community spaces, scholarships, job placements, really important stuff for sure. Thanks so much for sharing. So here's sort of some of the important things that we're looking for is sort of that real consultation. We want to be able to work with the city. We want to be able to work with Metrolinks to establish better processes and outcomes for our community to be able to lead this development. So we want to have partnered collaboration. We want to be able to have community decision making. The community is there to make those decisions of how that community is supposed to be. As I always say, there is no community without the people in the community. We could have services, we could have all these different resources, but without the people and without those services being tailored for our community, that's one of the most important things that we need to, relay. Early consultation, so talking about these types of things, having discussions regarding these changes early on in the process, and having this type of information sharing. Transparency and reporting, following through and accountability is also something that we really are pushing for. And a commitment to Moss Park. Every community is unique, and so every community has different needs and different services that are not even just services, a lot of just being able to address sort of needs and identifying gaps in the community. Every community is different, so we need to have a commitment to Moss Park. As a community, be able to know its history, know its community and how it is. And we need clear structures and mechanisms for achieving the above. So we need to be able to have this consultation and to be able to have a clear way of understanding how this stuff is going to be carried out. Moss Park Equity Impact Assessment, we have this. Transparency, information sharing, community improvement for the community center and for Moss Park, community benefits agreements for the Ontario line, a huge thing that has been implemented in other projects as well. And we want to be able to have this in our community. We also expressed the need, just had a conversation last week actually with someone who was asking about jobs that are going to come out of this project, being able to work in this field. And I think that's a really important concern and something that the community should be able to have. And a push for a Moss Park social development plan table. We do have a SDP table, for Regent Park, and I think it's something that's really important for Moss Park to be able to come together and have a platform to be able to talk about, these different changes and what the community needs overall. And so that's a really important platform that we need to be able to push for and have that developed. Awesome. So at this moment, again, we'd like to welcome our councillor for joining us. I know our councillor is also really busy, has a busy schedule, but we'd like to also thank you, Councillor Wan-Tam, for being here, and feel free to share any updates and information that you have.
Well, thank you very much, and it's good to be here. I caught a little bit of the presentation, and I want to just say thank you to the organizers, to the community that's been trying to uplift the area residents to, number one, pull them all together for these important conversations. Kamsa, as you were going through the list of priorities and what you heard from the community, and to be quite honest, these are the same issues that have been raised at City Council. I've done the very best I can to also bring the voice of the community to those conversations with Metrolinks. Not always necessarily easy, and I see that we do have some Metrolinks representatives here, but they are absolutely critical to the advancements of our neighborhood. So when it came to opportunities such as, where does the station go, like the new Queen Street station, that's something that I know that I have raised. How to mitigate the impact on the trees and the loss of parkland. We don't have a lot in this area, but what we have, we want to maintain and we want to preserve. And losing those 45 trees and injuring another 13 is not what I would say great look for any park. And at the same time, having a construction fence that sits around half of the park for close to 8 years is going to hurt. So having those issues raised here and having you say what I've been saying at City Council and in my meetings with Metrolinks was really quite affirming to me, to be quite honest, just because it's one thing if the councillor raises them, it's another thing when the community is also repeating it. So I'm really glad that you raised the issue. And Mark Clancy, I see you nodding, so it's not the first time you've heard it, but what I'd love to see, and I think that the community would love to see, is some responses from Metrolinks on how can we place that station in a way that doesn't disrupt the park for 8 years, where we don't lose 56 trees altogether, including the ones that are injured, and how do we incorporate that design so it actually is going to read more holistically with the architecture that's going to be adjacent to, which is the new community center. The community has, I agree with you that the John Innes Community Center had some stops and starts and starts and stops. It was certainly not the way that the city generally builds a community center. And I think that for those who really have been following the conversation around the community center, you'll probably recall that it was originally instigated because we had a private donor. So a private donor came to the city and said, look, I've got, X number of millions of dollars. We want to catalyze the change of that community center and rebuild it. And we went through 2 years. I was there with you, 2 years where we talked and did consultation, largely led by the consultants that were hired by the philanthropists. And then at some point in time, they decided that they weren't going to proceed with the city. Not their fault, change of direction. But what it meant is that it kind of set us back because we don't have a new community center. But the good thing is that the city now is going to build it for you, and it's not going to be encumbered with this or that. It's basically designed with the community in mind. So you will be getting an invitation very shortly. It will be put into your mailbox to invite everyone to come out and take a look at the new John Innes Community Center. What does the Moss Park Arena look like? And how do we integrate all of that on the Sherbourne elevation of the park? So therefore, you're going to have some new assets. Zara Menaz, who is my staff person at City Hall, who represents the area and your interests in the office and at City Council, she's dropped a link into the chat. That link gives you a sense of the timelines that the city is working with to come out and have another conversation. It's going to be much better, I would say, as a community center, because it's going to be, number one, realistic to build this community center. And we're still going to be spending probably about $60 to $70 million to refurbish the community, to refurbish the arena, to completely rebuild the community center. You will not have one swimming pool, but you'll have 2 swimming pools. You'll have all the recreation facilities that you need, as well as to make sure that we have very little to no disruption of service, because that's what the community is asking for. The other thing is that we're going to be completely redesigning all of Moss Park, the green space. So obviously we're going to have to replace a lot of trees. And it's very regrettable that that has to happen, but there's an opportunity to give that entire campus, I'll call it the Moss Park campus of community public assets, it's going to be entirely rebuilt, which is good. It's really, really good. And we know that when parks and these type of assets are built, they're built for the next 75 years, which means that once the community center is complete, it's going to be there. You and your family and the generation after and the generation after will get to use those facilities for the next 75 years, subject to state of good repair, but it is going to be done. And when you take a look at John Innes Community Center today, I agree, it's quite outdated. It doesn't work. It could be improved. Those improvements are coming. Coming back to the conversation regarding housing, for sure, the city is in the grips of a very challenging housing crisis. It has been, of course, very challenging to see applications for rezoning by developers march in to City Council and not have the legislative policy planning tool to compel them to build housing that is affordable and a range of affordability, not just 80%. Average market rents, but rather deeply affordable and moderately affordable. So the help that we need, which has been probably a 20-year battle, which was to get inclusionary zoning in place, which means that any development over a certain size and it has physical qualifying criteria, they will now have to build in affordability if they're looking to come into the city for permissions for change. That kicks in September the 18th. It's going to be a really big day for us because it's also going to mean an entirely new planning regime at the city. It's still technically, I think, within the scope of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, which is Minister Clark. I believe he can still appeal that if he wants to, or he can change the city's criteria. I believe he still has that ability, but as far as I can tell, it probably won't. It won't change. So the new criteria will have about 8%, not quite 10%, but pretty darn close as a starting point for affordability. That means 8% of affordable units coming in to every single building that meets that qualifications. An interesting footnote is that those inclusionary zoning criteria are set out within what they call the protected major transit station areas. So mouthful, I get it. And so that means technically, I would love to see this neighborhood, which is getting its own new station, as well as First Parliament and Corktown. Technically, those are they should be protected major transit station areas. It should have the inclusion of new affordable housing. It should have, but somehow the province has removed itself and their lands and their projects from meeting that criteria. I hope that I don't know if you fully caught what I said, but the province is building housing. They're building only market housing, even as it's sitting on top of major new transportation hubs, which is their subway hubs. And they've given themselves the out, meaning that they're opting not to build affordable housing. So it could happen here on Queen Street, but they're not going to do that here. It is ridiculous. I entirely agree with you, Darcy. So if I can just finish up on this point regarding community benefits. And Mark, I'm really glad you're here from Metrolinks. I value the opportunities that we have to interface with you. I know you don't control what Metrolinks does. I entirely do that. I understand that. But I think that you've heard from our community enough times that you have access to other folks that we don't necessarily have access to. And that includes key decision makers that could really support what we're asking for. The saving of the trees, the moving off of the parkland as much as possible, giving us safer streets in the interim, including a better construction management transportation plan. All those things are needed, but we still need to understand, and I will finish on this point, we still need to understand what the community benefits package looks like. And at this point in time, you have built this, you've got a station concept, you're getting your road occupancy approvals. We know you're going to occupy the park for 8 years and potentially longer, we don't know. And all we've been asking for during this entire time is give the community and the city a seat at the table so we can actually help co-create the community benefits arrangements with you. So therefore, don't do it to us, but do it with us. And so that's the message I'm going to leave behind today for the community to amplify what their needs are. But also, Mark, we're going to need Metrolinks to respond to us. It can't be that we continue to meet and state every problem because we know what the problems are. But it's time for solutions, and we can't make those solutions happen without Metrolinks inviting this community, the local representatives, the civic leaders to the table. And you'll find that this community is not unreasonable. They want what they need to be successful, and they need jobs. They need employment opportunities. They need pathways to financial independence. We need to have a community hub right on Queen Street, historic Queen Street East. And we need to be able to build more affordable housing, and we need to be able to work with you. And we need all of those investments to stay right here in Moss Park. So I'll leave you with that and to say thank you again for the invitation, everybody. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Councillor Wan-Tam. Now this is an opportunity to hear from residents and members of the coalition. Mark, you probably heard a lot from the councillor.
Yeah, I did.
You can go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things, and thank you so much, Councillor, for your advocacy and yes, we've had several meetings now, and where you have expressed your concerns and suggestions, and being here with all of you today and hearing your passion and dedication to the community, and I wrote down all your slides that talked about where you need Metrolinks to support the great work that you are working towards for the community. I wrote it all down, and just being here today really helps me appreciate where your needs are, what the community needs, and how Metrolinks can support some of those initiatives. We're not going to be able to support them all, but there's definitely areas where we can be that partner. And Councillor, to your point, I'm in a position where I can take a lot of what I'm hearing today back to the decision makers within the organization, and I'm committed to doing that. I know that there's a definite need for us to come come to you and all communities along the Ontario line with details on our community benefits program. I hear that, you know, through all of the interactions I have throughout the alignment with various communities and BIAs, et cetera. And we are working through that. You know, there's progress being made within the organization, but you're right, Councillor, it's not about us telling you what we're doing. Our community benefits program is about working together to build that program together. And that is a commitment from Metrolinks and myself, because I do appreciate and understand you know, the uniqueness of Moss Park. And I'm certainly, there were a couple of other comments earlier about, you know, community engagement and how we can do better at that within the community. And I'm certainly open to any ideas and suggestions. I'd love to be out there and provide a tour for the community to talk about the work that the Ontario line, you know, will include within the Moss Park space. I'm super excited to hear that the John Innes Community Center has some momentum. That's a great win for the community. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I really appreciate you being honest and open about your concerns and the opportunities and how Metrolinks can support you where we can. And I know this is not, I take your point about, you know, we don't want to keep having these conversations. It's about demonstrating actions and how we can deliver on those actions as an organization and as an agency of the provincial government. And we will bring back to you how we can you know, how we can achieve some of those actionable items that we've talked about here and at our CLC meeting that we held back in February. And we will have an upcoming CLC as well. But I want it to be a very collaborative environment where we make action together. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mark. Does anyone else have some thoughts to share? Jelani, I see the chat. You mentioned some key priorities. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, just I don't want to sound like a broken record because I mentioned it before with Mark. I'm just more concerned with like the economic impact of all the work that's going to happen, not just the Metrolinks, and then how the community can be impacted and empowered to take advantage of those things. Because the reality is, the reviting John Ennis and the park is a bigger thing at play. There's condos coming more into the community. With revite comes a sense of gentrification, so the cost of living is it may go up. So those things all impact our residents, especially when we start to bring in grocery stores that are not food basics or no frills, things like that. The cost of living in the area goes up, especially you're getting access to transportation now in Moss Park. So we definitely know that more people are going to want to live in the surrounding community, and with that comes a cost. So.
Thank you for raising that, Jelani. I know you've been advocating to ensure there's opportunities for the youth and other members that, you know, have been historically disfranchised. So thank you so much for referencing that. Shana, Darcy, Naomi, anyone else would like to share any questions or concerns? We've got our counselor and our friends from Metrolinks here, so please speak.
Yeah, hi, Naomi Chorney here from Acorn Arts Project based in Regent Park. So as part of our ongoing community building and working with groups in the community, one of the questions I've noticed that has come up a lot is, you know, what about as revitalization happens, you know, creating opportunities for small businesses to thrive and local, especially local businesses that serve the community, and keeping the wealth within the community. Because, you know, as expansion happens, there's usually a tendency for, you know, and the comment was made earlier about, you know, high-end stores come in that, are sort of unaffordable to perhaps a large segment of the community. And so there's that piece. So, does it mean we're going to have more Wendy's and Starbucks and Tim Hortons, or can we see like some small, local coffee shops and small businesses? And what is that even on people's radar? And is that built into these revitalization initiatives?
Wendy, hi, it's Kristen. And sorry, no, Naomi, hi, it's Kristen. I feel like that question may be sort of directed at the city, especially when it comes to rezoning and what can be built at the podium of the buildings, how to complete that contiguous street wall where you have fine grain retail, modest enough sized businesses that will attract the mom and pop shops. Because I really feel like that's what really would make a unique historic Queen Street shopping and dining and entertainment destination for the area residents as well as visitors alike. One of the things that we started to do, and this is not always easy, but we've actually started to work with developers to shrink their floor plate. So therefore, we try to cap the size of their retail space to under 2,000 square feet. It was really hard to get them smaller than that. And that means that, no major chain will really want to come in if it's too big. So you're not going to see, big box retail, because they need about 14,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet for their sort of skids to work. And but that's something that we have been doing, especially along historic Yonge Street, so we can recreate that rhythm and pattern of small fine grain retail to hopefully attract independent operators. The other thing that I would love to see, and that's something that the city can do. So what I just mentioned is something that city planning can lead the conversation on. But another thing that would really be helpful is and we don't have it, but I'm hoping that at some point in time it becomes a reality, is that not only do we need to reintroduce rent control for all residential property, so therefore people aren't left to the mercy of predatory landlords, but we need to introduce some form of commercial rent control. So it's about making sure that business owners aren't going to be seeing a huge escalation at the end of their 4 or 5 year lease terms. I think that would be very helpful. And then the final piece, which we do need Metrolinks to support on, is a piece that you've, I think, so rightly raised, Naomi, about financial supports for businesses that will be impacted by the construction of the Ontario line. I have a colleague at City Council, his name is Mike Cole, and he is one of the 3 councillors along the Eglinton Crosstown. And he has said to me, as well as the other 2 councillors who represent the area, is that the Eglinton Crosstown, although it was designed and purposefully to bring in prosperity and high order transit to their area, the businesses haven't been able to survive the construction. And that includes, historic and iconic Little Jamaica, where they have literally just sort of seen their roads torn up for over a decade. And of course, being behind construction timelines, behind budget expectations, and hopefully there's an end in sight, but businesses have come and gone. Intergenerational loss of businesses, so for example, mom and dad handing down their stores to their kids, the kids couldn't hold on. This has been a real eye-opening experience, I think, for all of City Council to watch, because that benefit, that public benefit, really has also created some long-term harm, because there wasn't enough protections in place when construction of the crosstown was being built. And this is why we really need Mark and Mark's team at Metrolinks to deliver a package to the city, so we can deliver it to the community, or they can deliver it to the community directly. We don't need to be in the way, but we've been asking them for a plan on financial compensation and incentives so that business owners are made and kept whole during a decade of construction. And that's something that we have to fight for. And I feel like it might have to come through the community benefits conversation, because as far as I can tell, Mark, you tell me if I'm wrong, but you said I can share my concerns. I'm sharing my frustrations as well, is that we have asked repeatedly, what does that financial incentive compensation package look like? So we don't destroy, livelihood. And all I've gotten back is we'll come back to you with an answer at some point in the future. So vague details today, and at some point in the future, you may let us know what's going on. For businesses on the street who are very nervous, we can't wait. So I don't know, Mark, if you want to just lean into that or perhaps provide some insight, because I feel like that is another massive elephant in the room that needs a Metrolinks reply.
And I wish I had an answer for that, Councillor. I know, you've spoken about that to us for quite some time and on many occasions. I know, the same question comes to us from other BIAs as well. Yeah. I don't have an answer. I'm going to be honest. I don't have an answer, but I'm making a note to take that back, and I'm going to, take that to my superiors to see where that's at, because I don't have an answer. I wish I did, but I don't.
Yeah, and Mark,
I hear you.
Yes, and I think it's important that the community is bearing witness to this conversation, because it's not just that the community has raised it today, and they have previously as well, but City Council has asked for this detail, this information on multiple occasions now, as you know, and we're still waiting. So Council is still waiting for this information as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wan-Tam. And Mark, thank you for taking this issues to our provincial government, making sure they understand that these are not just community priorities, but they're community concerns. We've learned from other communities who have been impacted through major projects. And what we don't want is we don't want to repeat the mistakes. We want to learn from them and hopefully, implement solutions that are community focused, so that the vitality of our community is not impacted, especially in the years to come. I'm just wondering if there's anyone else like to raise any questions. You can also do that in the chat, but we would love to hear from you. We talked about the impact on our local businesses. We talked about deeply affordable housing. We talked about green spaces. Lisa, I see in the chat, you mentioned the impact on green spaces and how we must mitigate the impact, because it does have an impact on not just our psychological well-being, but on how, this important green community spaces. Lisa, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we've been in the community for so many years that we know how important that space is. And every time I think about it, Mark, and I think about the barrier and the inability of the residents or the community to access that park, it's really a nightmare for them. And it was a decision made by Metrolinks. I understand that, but it is very, very damaging to the community. And even seeing that barrier every day for years, it's very negative, and it adds nothing to the community, but it's going to take away a lot for them. I feel really strongly about this, so strongly.
Yeah,
and I wrote it, and I've talked about it a lot with the coalition and Building Roots, but it's something that really needs to be looked at again.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Lisa. I hear it, and I can hear it in your voice, and I don't know why the space is as large as it is when it comes to that construction space, but I'll take that back and see if there's ways that we can perhaps reduce that footprint. I know that when the construction team is brought on board, when we actually complete the procurement process, we do encourage our contractors to look at the space that they need for construction activities and look at ways to to reduce that so we can minimize the impact. But I can take that back to our project team to find out where they're at in that process, to see if there's anything that we can do.
And it's also the
to help
fact that,
minimize that space.
sorry, Mark, sorry.
Yeah.
But, you know, I also have to raise that green space is for many, the only green space they have. And to take it away for so many years, it really doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And I just have to keep saying it's going to be very damaging to the community.
Yeah.
So I hope it can be looked at again, and I hope that solutions can be found. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that.
Thank you both. Kais, do you want to go through the next phase? And I don't see anyone else wanting to comment as of now. And I actually want to thank Norella from Minister Marcy Ian's office. Thank you for joining us today. If there's any thoughts you would like to share, please feel free.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Norella. Yep.
Just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting our office. It's really, really great to hear from everyone and to also see what's happening in the community. And then also relay the message back to MPE and let her know what's happening. So we're aware and we can think of ways that we can actually help and work with our municipal and provincial counterparts.
Thank you, Norella.
So thank you so much.
We appreciate the support of Minister Marcy Ian on this cause. Kais, you want to take us on to the next couple of slides, which are important?
Sure, yeah, okay. Let's do next steps. This is where we're going to be able to see what is important for us to be able to do in the upcoming future, in the upcoming days regarding these developments. It's a critical step that's going to determine the character and future of our community. So I think one of the important things that we also highlighted in our last meeting was that we wanted to have our community come together to develop a Moss Park Community Benefits Report, which is a really, really important way of understanding each and every single member of our community's needs and their sort of things that they'd like to have addressed in the community. And how this report can basically have a huge impact on sort of, the developments that are occurring and how it could guide them. It's important, as the councillor mentioned, having a seat at the table and having our community there to be able to guide this development, right? We should have them to be able to guide with us, right? So it's really important if we can have something like this happen in our community, so that we can have a lot more engagement with Metrolinks and just the overall development for sure.
So,
yeah.
Also want to welcome Leah. Welcome to our meeting, Leah.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome everybody who's joined our meeting, and just thanks again for everyone who's given their time here to voice their concerns and raise some really, really important points. This is sort of the discussion itself is something that is a huge milestone. A lot of communities, a lot of places, it's really hard to have sort of a platform to be able to speak. And what the coalition is here to do is to be able to inspire our community to be able to have their voices heard, instill leadership amongst our community to be able to be at important decision making. So, and this is also what we'd like to inspire communities around the city to be able to do as well. So really appreciate everybody's presence. But we also do have this slide here for community planning principles, and these are all just examples of ways that we can start thinking about this process. So just a few of them could be like renew. So how do we renew the Moss Park community? Just starting to think about things, right, to be able to develop this type of report. Reintroduce, how to reintroduce pedestrian-friendly streets and park spaces. Really important during this construction. Design, how do we design a safe and accessible neighborhood, right? How do we involve the community in the process? How do we build on cultural diversity, youth skills, and energy? As I've said, every community is unique. Every community has their own cultural aspects, diversity, group of youth, and skills and energy that's available. How do we create a diverse neighborhood with mixed uses, including a range of housing, employment, institutions, and services? How do we design clean and environmentally responsible neighborhoods? Increase the number of affordable housing units, which has been a huge concern amongst our residents in the community, especially how we know about the new Dash development for the condos that are coming. So that's been a really big concern regarding affordable housing. How do we minimize disruption for households during relocation? Another huge concern. Developing financially responsible strategies, a good successful neighborhood with good jobs, and how do we improve the remainder of Moss Park during the development? We want to be able to think about Moss Park overall as a community, and how we learn about every single one of our residents, because every single one of our residents has a voice and has specific needs. And so that's something important to really consider. So these are just some guiding principles that we can take into account when assessing what our community needs. And we have our call to action. Another really important step is to stay informed on the Moss Park subway, as it's something that's a really important concern at the moment. But not just the Moss Park subway, to be also really informed about other really important developments and concerns that are in our community, right? Affordable housing is one thing. Housing for people experiencing homelessness. All these are really big concerns in our community. Just to be able to stay informed on these new developments is something that's really crucial, and something that the Moss Park Coalition is really aims at doing, involving the community members to be able to become leaders in this aspect. Keep learning more about community benefits, as we've learned today, and how important community benefits are, especially during these developments. As we've seen across different neighborhoods, and as Kumsa also mentioned. So these are really important and can have a huge impact on our community, as we've heard from residents at our market. Contact your elected representatives, MP Marcian, MPP Suze Morrison, and our councillor too. These are our elected representatives who are here to hear our voices here. For our concerns, and to take those and to be able to have action with them too. So I encourage everybody to be able to voice your concerns, and let our councillor who's here today too, and we're really honored to have our councillor here, just voice your concerns, right? Our councillor are here, MPPs are here to be able to hear us and to be able to take action as well. And stay in touch with your Moss Park Community Benefits Coalition. You can come to the Moss Park Market. We're here every Saturday of the week, 11 to 4. We're there to answer any questions, have conversations, and just to be able to learn more, to voice our concerns. It's really important to be able to have a platform. And we've had some really amazing conversations, some that basically last almost 10 to 15 minutes in extreme cold weather and wind, which is really inspiring to see the level of concern that our community has. And so that's really an amazing thing. And contact the Moss Park Coalition. We have our email down here, mossparkcoalition@gmail.com. Let us know concerns, thoughts, questions, and just to get involved as well. There are many opportunities to get involved. Some of them include being able to hold your own information sessions in your buildings, talking to your networks, being able to promote these types of developments in your community as well. And we also tailor the involvement to your specific skills and capacity that you'd like to be involved in as well. So feel free to reach out and join us anytime. I know the councillor just raised his hand, so go ahead, councillor.
Oh, thank you very much. And I love the fact that you're wrapping up the meeting with a call to action. I just wanted to make sure that in full disclosure and just as a reminder, people know that I'm actually leaving City Council, and it has obviously been a real true honor to serve. I've said it on numerous occasions. It's serving Toronto residents, Toronto Centre in particular, representing this group, this community has been the greatest, truest honor of my life. But just so everyone is aware, my last day at City Council is May the 4th. And at that point in time, I hope to be running in the provincial election to replace our esteemed MPP, Suze Morrison. But I'm not going very far. If I'm fortunate enough to seek and win the election, I hope to be your provincial champion. I just wanted to make sure you folks all knew where I was going. Our office will stay entirely open. The intention is to try to support the interim councillor, which will be appointed by City Council, but also to make sure that the new incoming councillor, whoever that may be, that they have a real strong transition. I hope to get him or her entirely on board and spend the time and energy to make sure that that the transition and all the files and the priorities of the community are completely going to continue to move forward. So there should be no hiccups. So I just wanted to let everyone know that. So if you contact me at my office, you probably won't find me there after May the 4th. But if you want my cell phone number, I'll be happy to drop it in the chat if you don't already have it. A lot of folks already seem to know how to find me.
Thanks, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Really appreciate everything that that you've done for the city and our community, and being here at our meetings too. That's such an important aspect of our meetings. It's just having you here, and it really provides a lot of hope for a lot of our residents to know that our elected leaders, our representatives are here to hear us. So thank you for everything that you've done for the city and our community, and all the best.
Thank you.
So yeah, in terms of calls to action or next step, those are some of the most important ones. Again, do reach out to us. I don't know, maybe Walid would like to touch on. Would this be something, Walid?
Thank you so much, Kais. This is just a quick announcement. In Regent Park, we have gone through a process to secure a community benefits agreement. And right now we've set up a community benefits oversight working group. If you know of any Regent Park residents that are interested in community benefits, please encourage them to apply. The deadline for application has been extended to this Monday, April 25th at 5 o'clock for grassroots representatives, so 2 grassroots representatives, but also 2 youth between 17 to 29 can serve on the community benefits oversight working groups. I just wanted to put it on everyone's radar to help spread the word. These appointments are for a minimum of 1, but the terms of 3 years. And they're going to help determine how 26 million or more in community benefits will be spent in the Regent Park community. And hopefully in the future, we'll have similar models in Moss Park where residents are able to actively participate in determining how the investments are made in our community. So it's done intentionally to support the priorities of Moss Park residents. So just want to share that news, and I think we're going to go to the next slide, Kais.
Yeah.
So please join our email list. Email mossparkcoalition@gmail.com to get on the email list. Please find out more about the community benefits movement. We have learned so much from our friends at Toronto Community Benefits Network. So please visit communitybenefits.ca and engage with us on social media, on our discussion board, and join our team. This is resident-led. It's also fueled by the energy of residents of Moss Park and other stakeholders. So we are in it together. It's not for us without us, right? It's a motto that we should always promote, that we must be part of every discussion and decisions that affect our community. So thank you all for joining us. And we are going to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Please feel free to share your contact information in the chat, and we will follow up with regards to the next steps and next upcoming meetings. Hopefully we'll have our meeting in person next time, but we're all aware that we're in the midst of a 6th wave. So that's why we're having our meeting over Zoom to be cautious, to ensure that everyone is safe. So thank you once again for joining us at our Community Benefits Coalition meeting. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone, all our representatives, Mark, Norel, Councillor Wan-Tam, everyone, all our community members, representatives from TCH, everybody here who's part of the community for joining. Thank you again.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little bell notification. And don't forget to check us out on all our social medias. And if you want to see more, check our website.
you.